As an industry over the next 10 years, we need to recognize that people don't want to work in a dark, dangerous profession. They want to be operators as opposed to manual laborers. So we're going to have to make a big push towards automating every single role that we have in plants and facilities and provide a much more rewarding job to the people that are coming in the industry.
Welcome to another podcast of Stocked and Delivered with your hosts, Todd London, and myself, Michael Goodman. Today we have Tyler Freres from Freres Lumber. They're doing some really cool things with mass ply. It's a 100-year-old company who's done many things along the way, but right now making mass ply, mass timber to make skyscrapers of literally wood.
Yeah, so they're taking a brand new technology, and what's really cool about this company, 100-year-old family company that's mired in tradition, that forced itself into innovation and has found a really interesting niche for itself. I know he's going to talk to us a lot about what's making their success take place and some of their leadership things. And I think overall, Tyler's just a really interesting character. So I hope to learn a whole bunch today.
Totally agree, Todd. I'm looking forward to it. And with that, here's Tyler Freres. It's another beautiful day here in Melville, New York. And welcome to another podcast edition of Stocked and Delivered. We are excited to have guest Tyler Freres from Freres Lumber. He is the Vice President of Sales as well as third generation. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, guys. I really appreciate the invitation.
So, Tyler, I guess for those of you, those who are listening who don't know you, do you want to tell a little bit about you and a little bit about your company?
Well, sure. Freres Lumber started in 1922, so we're on our 100th and third year starting this next year. So been in business for quite a while. We started out as a lumber producer back when you had to bring the mill to the forest as opposed to the forest to the mill. So we had our roots at the North Fork of the Santiam Canyon on the Santiam River, and we were producing just straight lumber-based products back in those days. And it was started by our grandfather, T.G. Freres. And we've since evolved, and we started producing. We moved to our current location back in the 1950s. Then we evolved into veneer manufacturing, subsequently panel manufacturing, electricity production, and mass timber products now. So it's been a big evolution over the last 100 years.
So as of today, how many people work in all those combined Freres lumber companies, and what kinds of roles make up all those teams?
So we handle everything from the forest and we contract out the logging, but we've got logging supervisors. So we handle from the initial timber sale contract all the way to the finished product. It takes for us about, right now we have 420 employees. We would actually like to have closer to 480, but it's been difficult finding labor over the last couple of years with all the disruptions in the economy.
Yeah, that certainly resonates with us. No shortage of problems there. Before we get into some of the stuff that Freres does, I think we'd like to get into a little bit about what you do. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about how you got involved in the family business and kind of what your current role looks like?
Yeah, so when I first came back from college, I started working directly in the manufacturer. So I had the dirt under the fingernails and sawdust in the air sort of thing, where I was helping our plant manager lay up plywood panels and learn the essential components to creating, high value commodity engineered wood products like what we consider plywood to be. So I did that for several years before our veneer salesman unfortunately passed away at that period of time. This is in the early 2000s. And then moved directly into veneer sales, plant scheduling, and really the transfer and the movement of our materials to all of our facilities to make sure that it was as efficient as possible. So that was really my responsibility for the majority of my 25 years, working here. But lately I've really been focusing on more of the overall view of the base products we make with veneer, the qualities of such, how we can create additional engineered wood products out of it, and then closely, directly interfacing with those people that are interested in more of the innovative wood products like mass timber or mass ply panel or mass ply land products. So that's really been my bigger focus over the last couple of years.
Very cool. And tell us what a typical day looks like for you as a leader at Freres.
Well, I mean, one of the things I enjoy the most during the day is when someone actually has a question. I can work with them directly because the people don't often realize that there's a lot of math involved in this business. That conversions and values are not actually easy. That it's actually very difficult. As just a general example, when we pull in a log, it's on a board footage basis. But then when we peel it into veneer, it's on a 3/8 basis per thousand 3/8 surface. So we have to translate it into that. And then when it goes into a panel product, it's the same type of basis, but it's on a dry weight as well. But then when we translate that into a mass timber product, it's on a cubic foot basis. So you have to have a very firm handle of how all these conversions work, not only by volume, but also by price. And to make sure that we're actually selling at a rate that we can sustain that's appropriate for the marketplace. So just the simple training of trying to get people to think through the math is actually can take quite a while.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so here's a thought for you. So you guys have been your third generation family company, and with that, I would assume there is a deep-seated tradition, and ironically, you guys are doing something that's a little outside of the norm of commodity. You're trying to find these value-added products. Specifically, you're doing mass timber. How do you, from a company culture perspective, I would assume that there's a large amount of your employee base that has been there for a long enough amount of time that like they probably come from a commodity background, and here you have this vision of being more than that. How do you talk to your company about where this company is going and bring them into this next evolution as your company goes to be part of this family organization that you built?
No, I think that's a very good question. You know, one of the things that we've discovered is that it truly takes every single one of our operations to make an advanced engineered wood product like we're doing. So every single portion is essential, and amazingly enough, it's all been added to over the last 100 years in the type of format. It's almost providence in that we have the abilities and the facilities to be able to make the product that we're making now. But to your point, there's a different level of diligence that goes into making a commodity plywood panel versus making LVL or engineered wood. Then even more when you start turning it into something that's going to be essentially the essential structural building components for an entire building. So, you know, we work hard to make sure that we are comfortable putting our heads down on a pillow at night, that we're not putting out a product that will not stand the entire life cycle of a building. And that's a different level of diligence than you need when you're just shipping out individual panels of plywood, where the level of liability is completely different. So, you know, to a certain extent, some of the product lines are separated. You know, the commodity plywood is separated from our engineered wood products production. So that kind of helps us work with individual teams so they understand the level of diligence we need with making those types of products.
Cool. So sticking with like management and leadership questions, what's your approach when you talk about the developing of people? You said the different groups and different teams, developing talent within the organization. Do you have any mentorship or leadership programs or anything special that you do to help develop them?
Well, you know, I think one of the overlooked items that's pretty simple is a booklet of standard operating procedures, which we've developed over time. It helps people understand exactly not only the computer systems that we deal with, but also, you know, those basic formulations of how do you do your calculations to understand the pricing of a product. We do things pretty consistently where we've got a management meeting every Monday that trickles down to our supervisors, but we also meet on every Tuesday morning for a general commodity plywood sales talk and a veneer sourcing talk. And then we also meet on Tuesday mornings to talk about the bigger projects that we're doing within the mass timber universe and the particular requirements of each one. Because what we're seeing right now is that everything is an innovation. There's no off-the-shelf solution with mass timber. Every new building requires another level of certification or is trying to answer another question or it has another request from the client. So everything is unique, and we're trying to work through all those issues about what we are capable of as a company and what's actually beneficial to us. So it really takes a lot of FaceTime and a lot of in-person discussion to understand how the manufacturing drives the product.
And do you want for the audience just to explain briefly what CLT is, what it's trying to displace, what your vision of this product looks like for the future?
Sure. Yeah. So what we do is we take our engineered wood product, our LVL classified material, and we turn it into a very large format panel. So on a mass ply panel, that could be something up to 12 feet wide, 48 feet long, and up to 12 inches thick. And then on our mass ply lambs, we can make something that's up to 4 feet wide and 2 feet thick. So with the lamb products, we're intending to create the entire structure for a building. So the beam, the column, the floor, the wall, the roof. So it's all prefabricated. Our mass ply lambs offset those beams and columns that you would typically see as glue lamb, but our panels offset the floor and the roof segments that would ultimately typically be steel and concrete in a multi-story building. But the real trick to it is the BIM modeling and the 3D modeling of the panels. So we're able to download the entire building schematic with all MEP connections pre-manufactured into the panels. And then we will logistically, we will sort those panels in the order in which they need to go on the structure that we're putting them on. So the overall goal of the mass timber universe is to alleviate some of the pinch points that we're seeing out there. We talked a little about labor. If you guys are seeing the news at all, there's a lot of concern about labor within the economy this next year, especially considering some of the immigration policy issues that we're going to be facing, and with a lot of very experienced labor in the construction market retiring over the next few years, and we can't move our products, and you guys can't move your products unless you have people that are nailing them together and putting the structures together. So we need to figure out how to create more housing more efficiently, use more wood because it's the most environmentally sustainable thing we have to build with, but it takes the labor to do so. So we're trying to get additional volumes of wood into multi-story buildings or any type of building type, and then alleviate some of the labor concerns and make sure that there's no sawdust on the job site, that all the sawdust gets captured in our mill.
So the way I've been taught about CLT and mass timber, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it's almost like Lego, right? So on a typical framing, you have all these 2x4s and 2x6s, and you're framing a house on the site. Versus mass ply and CLT is where the pieces already come in. You just got to put them together. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. Yeah, it's pre-modeled from the start. They've got all the connections built into the model. So hopefully, a lot of the obstructions that typically run in if people are just flying by the seat of their pants on the construction site are not there, because this takes a lot of pre-modeling and pre-engineering and a little bit of diligence up front in order to make this. But the end result is a building that goes up very quickly with very little labor and is a much more sound structural application.
And right now that the CLT mass timber does have use, a lot more use in other countries. Is that correct?
Yeah, Europe's been kind of the forerunner on this. They've had CLT, cross-laminated timber, in development for the last 25, 30 years. So they've got a real jump start on us as far as a industry. But what we're seeing is it's really taking off because the architects and engineers are finally able to make a direct comparison between using wood or steel or concrete and what is the environmentally most sustainable product we have to build with. And wood is renewable, it's recyclable, it's reusable, and just by its very nature, it's one of the finest carbon sequestrating machines on the face of the earth, and it's solar powered. So, compared to concrete and steel, I don't think there's any comparison that people want to build with wood, not only because it's a environmentally smart thing to do, but I think we can make it the most economical thing to do as well.
So in Europe and in the U.S. Or North America, is it used more for larger buildings, or do you also see it in residential, single family homes?
I think Europe's probably a little bit more down the road of using it for single family. It's a stretch to use our type of product for single family homes. We've done quite a few single family homes, but there has to be a particular use. Let's say a very short building period. People are looking for fire resiliency, or Yeah, the heavy snow load, that would be another reason. We've done several buildings in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
But I guess I'm really asking, the potential is that every building could eventually be kind of these Lego pieces that are made, assuming the supply chain is set up properly and the people know how to build using it. Is that what, like, the future? Is that what where it's going? That all buildings go there, or is it more focused on the commercial side?
No, the goal is that all buildings can ultimately be translated into an all wood structure. And just to give you an example, we recently completed a 60,000 square foot warehouse distribution center that is on a 40-foot by 48-foot grid, meaning your column spacing is on 40 feet by 48 feet. And it was an extremely economical building compared to, say, a Butler building or other type of pre-engineered metal building. So we think we can go head to head with the large producers of distribution. We've completed the tallest mass timber building on the West Coast, which is the Oh Wow 1510 Webster.
Cool.
It's 19 stories of multifamily, and that project exceeded expectations. And we're going to be starting the next project with Oh Wow in February.
And amazing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So it's clearly started to catch fire in, well, not catch, that's probably a bad pun. It's catching traction in Europe. We're starting to see additional adoption in the United States. In your mind, what's the tipping point? What needs to take place for this adoption to go from early adoption to a more maturated state?
Well, from the marketplace, there's always the fear of something new. Contractors are risk averse because there's a lot of risk to putting up a building. So they need to have a few more case studies to understand where the potential areas to lose money are and where the potential to make money is. So, a few more examples, a couple more years of working through some of these projects, I think are pretty important. It comes down to the resource cost too. If Oregon and the Pacific Northwest and the federal government and our state government are really interested in making mass timber a mainstream item, then what they could immediately do is start managing the forests in the Pacific Northwest to provide additional fiber to all producers here. Because what we see right now is that there's a continual reduction in timber harvest, which leads to extremely high pricing for materials, which doesn't do us any good, especially when there's significant amounts of foreign imports coming into the U.S.
And out of curiosity, does Freres, or do you work with any associate companies that are doing any types of lobbying for that type of cause, just to kind of support what you're trying to grow in the marketplace?
Yeah, we're involved in several different types of lobbying organizations, whether it's the American Forest Resource Council, Oregon Forest Industries Council, those places that can make an impact to say that we need to change our forest management policy in the Northwest in order to create more resilient forests, to support our local communities, and to create some of the most advanced engineered wood products of the future. That's what we're really looking to do.
I think it's amazing. I'm sure everyone who you talk to and when they first learn about this is like, wow, I didn't know this is possible. I know you could build a building with wood. How do we do this? How do we figure it out? And it's really cool to learn and see what's going on and from your perspective. I think the first question that pops in everyone's mind, I'm sure you've answered this 1,000 times, is what about fires? Wood and fires. So tell us about how it actually is more safer and better than a concrete or steel building.
Sure. The cool thing about wood is that it burns very predictably. So as you would see if you throw a big log on a fire or on a campfire and you're trying to get it burned, it actually takes a long time if the fire is small in order to catch that log on fire. So wood actually maintains its structural capacity much longer than steel or even concrete. So while it's combustible, as it burns, it creates a char layer that restricts the movement of fire through the panel. So while the level at which steel gives up is somewhat indeterminate, you can calculate under specific fire conditions how long a building will stand. So this is where the prescriptive code for the IBC has come in, where they have essentially provided a path for code approval for buildings up to 18 stories with all wood. And it's entirely based on fire to make sure that they're fire safe and meet minimum fire, say a 2-hour fire rating.
And then just to kind of double down, a tangential question, but I think in the same vein. So understanding that this could be a residential product, from the sounds of it, it seems as if the multifamily displacing steel and concrete is the low-hanging fruit. What are some potential implications between tariffs or other kind of offsetting aspects that could make this move more quickly or less quickly?
That's a really good question. And I think if anyone has a crystal ball that they understand exactly what's going to happen this next year when faced in an environment where we're looking at widespread tariffs, I'd love to see it, because I really don't. I think this next year is going to be a year of change, and it's going to be pretty unpredictable. What I would love to see is, of course, responsible regulation. Not over regulation that adds just a ton and plethora of costs onto producers and manufacturers in the United States. As a timber industry, I feel like we're one of the most regulated industries in the country, not only from the supply of the raw material, but also through the manufacturing. And we cannot compete with countries like China, Russia, South America, or even Canada if we're so overburdened by regulation and they have no regulation in the countries in which they're operating. So as far as tariffs being an equalizing factor for those regulations that people hold valuable in the US, that they can look to force that type of values over on foreign countries, I think that's a real good use of it to make sure that we're just not transferring one environmental harm from the United States to another country. The whole "not in my backyard" idea is really tough. And I think that goes for the commodity products as well. I think that we can't always let our manufacturers suffer in the United States just to the benefit of foreign producers and importers.
Good point. Speaking of that topic, how other countries are able to do certain things or not able to do certain things. And you're on the leading edge of this. You're one of the few in the U.S. Can you just talk about the competitive set here in the U.S. that make CLT and mass timber and the rest of the world? Is it a large world? Is there only very few who are doing this right now in a big way?
Yeah, I think, I haven't done the full tally of how many producers there are in the world or in the U.S. Just on a ballpark, I think there's probably about 7 or 8 producers in North America right now, of varying degrees of sophistication and volume. But there's quite a few producers in Europe since they've had such a head start to us. But we're seeing a lot of European mass timber products come into the United States. And, those are macroeconomic issues that if Europe's not performing economically, they always look to the U.S. to send their products to. And that's typical of any wood commodity product or mass timber. If Europe's economy starts to improve, I don't think they have enough production of mass timber for their own use if they start to grow again. So that would leave more of an opportunity for the U.S. to produce more of its own domestic supply. And of course, I always want to be able to tie domestic wood product supply to the forest they come from. I think we as consumers really need to be aware that there's a forest to frame aspect to this, that we must manage the resources under our responsibility, whether it's the federal land or the state land, for the benefit of the forest that we have, and to also create product and create wealth and prosperity for our rural communities. Those things go hand in hand.
You talked about, look, this is not fully maturated. People don't know. We're trying to educate the marketplace. They need more case studies, which obviously I think that's the right answer for any emerging product. With this being a product that has the value proposition of sustainable and eco-friendly, I would assume that the most appealing value chain entity that you can go after is likely the architect, if we're talking about these large multifamily buildings. What does effort look like from that end to kind of bring this to market at an accelerated rate?
Well, I think we've been lucky to a certain degree in that mass timber has really captured the imagination of architects. So architects haven't been an issue. They actually are fairly sophisticated and understand the environmental trade-offs that are involved there. A lot of times the hurdle can really be the engineer, because it's their stamp on a building. They're the ones that are making the risk to say that this building will be standing forever or for the lifetime of the structure. So a lot of the times the engineer is the one that we need to convince.
So just talk to us a little bit about that. What does that pain point look like? How do you overcome that? What does that effort look like?
This goes into what I was mentioning as far as every single building is an innovation. So whether or not it's an increased cantilever, it's a particular use as a column, it's how much column that they want to take off, or penetrations within a platform. All these things, it seems like every project that we've had to go through additional testing in order to alleviate the concerns of an engineer as far as the particular application. For the wow structure, for instance, that was a point supported slab. And just as a general example, description, what that is, it means that you've got a big floor platform that's only supported by columns. There's no beam. It means that you have to have dual directional span on the panel. Well, we just recently gone through additional certification with testing with Oregon State University to substantiate our 6-inch panel on a 12-foot width and a 16-foot span for a point supported slab system. But I mean, we've been at this for 5 years, and it's taken this long to get that type of testing done because it's a very complicated process. So every project we get questions like that. Every project we have to dig deeper into the R&D and make sure that we can answer the questions and alleviate concerns.
Well, it's a challenge, but I think it's you're going one at a time, and I think as you knock each of those dominoes down, you have your chances continue to increase as more and more pick up and want to adopt. Talking about environmental, as we were just talking about, carbon sequestration. You mentioned that before. That's a big selling point of mass timber. Can you explain how the sequestration works, particularly with these practices?
Sure. This goes back to, really our grade school days where we learn the carbon cycle, where, essentially trees breathe in carbon dioxide and they pull off that carbon and they use that to build up their cellular structure. And then they breathe out oxygen. And of course, that's a beneficial cycle for us. That's what we all need to happen. And those younger trees grow more vigorously. So they breathe in more carbon dioxide, and over their lifespan, they sequester more carbon. As a total carbon sink, larger trees, of course, have more carbon in them. But if you're looking at a beneficial cycle for carbon sequestration, you really want to have a rotation of that fiber as well, where you take, the forest, you manage it, you take certain sticks off, you process those, and you put it into a building where all the carbon is sequestered in the building for the lifetime of the structure. So, 1 cubic meter of wood will actually sequester 1 atmospheric ton of carbon from the atmosphere. So like I said, it's one of the greatest carbon sequestrating devices that we have on Earth, and we should encourage the growth of trees.
I'm going to let you stand on a soapbox here for a moment. You mentioned that there is other CLT competition. Do you want to take a minute or two and talk about what makes your CLT kind of an advantaged product?
Yeah, the advantage that we have with creating a veneer-based mass timber is a lot of the benefit that you see from, say, the substitution of solid sawn dimensional lumber to LVL. So the progression that we've had with substituting those products over time. We can make a product that has a much tighter design value, so much more predictable performance than you can with a lumber-based product, much like LVL does with lumber. So for instance, you also get a laminating effect where you get much higher performance out of gluing woods together. One, you never have a defect that's actually bigger than 1/8 of an inch. You're not going to have a knot that goes all the way through a piece of LVL. It stops at the thickness of your veneer. While with lumber, you can have a knot that goes all the way through that, which is going to lead to significant weakness within the board. That's just the fact that we're dealing with a natural material. So because of that, say on a comparative basis, our 5-inch panel can hit a 15 to 16 foot vibration controlled span. It takes a 7-inch plus CLT panel to get to that type of performance. So right from that point, all costs being associated with volume in our industry, we hope to save about 20% of the overall project cost with equivalent spans. So from that standpoint, yeah, I think we've got a much more engineered product than is typically available with a solid sawn input into a CLT panel.
And could you just talk about why that is? Is it just the investment in R&D? Is there something unique and special that can't share? What makes it so different and better performing?
It comes back to the resource for one. Douglas fir is a fantastic softwood building material. But it's really just the fact that if we're able to create a product with a predictable recipe of veneer grades within it, so you end up with a consistent stiffness rating. So in LVL parlance, a 2.1E, a 1.9E, a 1.6E for your overall bending stiffness. Well, our standard panel comes out at a 1.6E. That's only reduced just by the fact that we're building an additional cross-dimensional strength into it. But a typical CLT is going to be closer to a 1.4E. So their span and stiffness is reduced compared to us just due to the laminating effect and the fact that we're using a much thinner material in order to make those laminations.
I mean, it's incredible stuff what you're doing, and the buildings that you're building are absolutely not only essential, but to your point, like it's crazy the imagination that you get to have with this sort of thing. Moving away from CLT for a moment, is there any other products that Freres is looking at or working on or intending to bring out that you think is also kind of in the same light as what this what a product like CLT can do?
Yeah, so one of the things that is very difficult about this business is it's very project based. So if the project is delayed and you had it set up in your production schedule, you're kind of SOL. It's not great to pre-produce product unless they're willing to take it soon, and you plug up your production area. So we've been pushing hard on making sure that we can make the commodity grade LVL products, whether it's form board, rim board, 2.1E LVL, or beam and header. We can make those as well and get a commodity base that we can build from in order to offset those times when the project isn't actually right. The other thing that we're really trying to do is that we're trying to adjust the appearance of the panel so it's more consistent with what CLT is, because that's the biggest complaint that people have is that, yeah, you look like a bunch of plywood panels up on the wall. It might perform better, it might be a lot cheaper, but I don't really like the aesthetic. So we're trying to cure that in the short term as well. Some of the things I find
just out of curiosity, what does that look like? Is that a brand on the panel itself? Is that something special that gives it an aesthetic, a different appearance? Like how do you overcome that?
With difficulty, but I think onto the way of doing it. It seems like every project that you want to look at in this business is about $3 to $5 million. But so what we're looking at doing is breaking our 4-foot wide engineered wood panels into, say, 9-inch, 10-inch wide boards, ease the edges, and then scramble the boards so you end up with something that looks like a board but performs like our LVL in a broader panel. So yeah, I can definitely send you guys some appearance looks that would give you an idea what that looks like.
Very cool.
Very cool. With over 100 years behind you, what's your vision for Freres over the next century?
Well, I really do think that we're on to what's going to be the next iteration of wood products here. And so over the next 100 years, I'm hoping that these products will continue to develop, that there's a lot of success for it. We would like to be more of a nationwide company as opposed to, all of these mass timber products are typically limited a little bit by delivery cost as well. So everything's delivered by truck right now. So most of our projects have really been, say, west of Texas or west of the Mississippi. We would like to be able to get into more of a nationwide productivity. And then, of course, I've got a couple of kids, and my brother's got a few kids too that we would love to see move into the industry, and because it's been extremely valuable to us and very rewarding. The work's been hard. There's nothing easy about it. It's a tough industry, but I think it's really rewarding, and I would love to see some additional young people get involved in it.
For sure, we're also looking for young people, and I hope my kids too one day are interested in the lumber world. You mentioned that geography poses you want to be more nationwide because the geography of where you could ship it to. It seems that the western states are more liberal or more progressive, I guess, with the building codes and allowing wood. I don't see as many on the East Coast. Maybe I just don't pay enough attention. Is that true? And is there a reason why it seems that more of the buildings are happening on the west side?
Yeah, so I do think that so far the West Coast has been pushing on it more. One, because of the resource that we have available to us. We're in the Northwest. We're very used to making structural wood products, and that really helps when you're creating a product like this. From the last stats I've seen from Woodworks, the East Coast is growing far faster now than what the West Coast is. So I think that we'll start seeing additional wood construction on the East Coast. The other thing that's kind of a hindrance is that, the wood species are dictated by geography as well. So you've got, say, a larger proportion of hardwoods over on the East Coast, which might not lend themselves easily towards creating a mass timber product like this. So it's been a real opportunity for Europe to take over a good portion of the East Coast production,
Yep.
Or essentially Canadian suppliers up on the East Coast of Canada.
That's interesting. So, if you don't mind, should we move over to some segments?
Yes, segments.
So every podcast, we have 3 segments that we do. They're all wood double entendres. The first segment we call Saw It Coming, and it's mainly about some future predictions. And so I know we mentioned labor, but outside of that, what do you think the biggest challenges the timber industry is going to face over the next 10 years?
Well, the thing that we faced over the last 10 years or last 30 years that I'm hoping that people will get a little bit of common sense with is timber supply. I think that there's going to be a push towards deregulation and another understanding that we need to manage our forest resources, which I think could be a boon for the entire wood products industry. As an industry over the next 10 years, we need to recognize that people don't want to work in a dark, dangerous profession, that they want to be operators as opposed to manual laborers. So we're going to have to make a big push towards automating every single role that we have in plants and facilities. And also, I think that AI is going to have a big thing to do with that, particularly with wood products industry. We've got to pay attention to vision technology, because right now everything is visually graded, typically in wood. So with allowing cameras and AI to recognize different aspects of the material is going to be hugely important going forward, especially if our goal is to automate as much as possible and provide a much more rewarding job to the people that are coming in the industry. The other thing I think that's going to happen as well in the mass timber universe is that there's going to be a push towards commoditization. Right now we integrate with every architect and engineer, but there are people that would like to get in between that, and we would like to be wood producers. There's not every project that we have to be the primary consultant for the architect, engineer, and project developer. If there are people out there that have regionalized CNC machines that are willing to make that investment, and that we can provide more of a commodity-based panel to drive down the costs and allow them to integrate with architect engineer, I think that's a real opportunity in the future, because it's going to allow us to ship by rail and really reduce the overall cost of these projects.
That's great. Speaking of mass timber, where do you see mass timber and engineered wood products having the most impact in development?
So I think that one of the most amazing things about veneer is that we are able to use so much more of the log, the raw material, the scarce resource that we deal with, than you can with a typical dimensional product. It's the age-old problem of trying to create a square product out of a round tree. So for us, we peel it off like a roll of toilet paper. So we're going to recover, typical rule of thumb is 80 to 85% of the total fiber into our finished raw material, or our finished product. Lumber is typical, 60, 65%. So there's a significant gain in the utilization of the fiber there. So as design requirements become much more specific and people are not as comfortable using products that don't have specific design engineering, I think we're going to continue to see the replacement of solid products with engineered wood products. I think it's natural development.
So just a kind of a selfish question and slightly an uneducated question. So I'll start with that preface. What do you see the role of two-step distribution in a product like CLT? If you look at lumber, it's a bit incestuous. Some mills will go direct to dealer. Some mills will also utilize distribution. With engineered wood, it seems to be going more towards a distribution type focus to get to the dealer. For a product like CLT, what does the value chain look like? Or what will it look like?
Well, I'm a firm believer that our markets develop in the way that they have because they add value on every single step of the supply chain. So people that think that they can just suddenly eliminate different steps or components within there, I think they're somewhat misguided. So what I would see is that, especially as, and this is very self-serving, but I believe that in order to create a commoditized mass timber product, that more people are going to be going towards veneer-based products in the future, because it's much easier to create design values that are predictable and equivalent across regions and across products and species with a veneer-based product than it is with a lumber-based product. So while right now, I think with cross-laminate timber and lumber-based CLT, every single region and every single producer will have a different design value. I think that window can be essentially almost eliminated, but definitely brought closer together if you're going to commoditize a veneer-based mass timber panel.
Makes sense. You got to have consistency amongst all the producers.
Exactly.
Otherwise, like you said, every job is a project, right?
Yep.
Every
And
job
we're
is
not afraid of the commodity markets. I mean, we've been in commodity markets for our entire existence. So right now, making a value-added product, our tendency is to say, hey, let's go after this. Let's make it bloody. Let's make it commodity-based and see if the market can benefit from it.
Next segment we call material moments, personal stories. Can you tell us a pivotal moment in your career or a lesson you've learned that sticks with you to this day?
Uh, One of the things that really does stick with me is was the 2008 2009 Great Recession. We've been through a whole lot of these types of experiences over the last 100 years as a company, whether or not it was the Great Depression, it was high inflation in the 70s, it was high interest rates in the early 80s. And these were lessons that were passed on to me from our older management team, my father and my uncle. And so they talked a lot about how they weathered these particular very dangerous times within the industry. And the 2009 Great Recession was my first experience with that. And so understanding what companies do when markets completely drop out, we went down to what, 400,000, 350,000 housing starts during that period of time. And so the takeaway for wood products was almost nothing. And we tried for, say, 1 or 2 months to say, well, we're just going to run 1 day a week in order to, help our employees and keep them on unemployment. But we really don't want to push product out there at, rock bottom prices, especially when our raw material prices were still high. But then, so going through the math and going through the experience, we realized that we had to run. So we had to be competitive. We have to make sure that we push everything as hard as possible and keep our people employed, or we're going to lose them. So about 4 months into it, we put the pedal down and we started operating again. And that was a real learning experience for me about how markets can absolutely suddenly disappear, because I didn't think that would happen up until then.
So we've been doing this podcast now for 3 months.
Yep.
And we've interviewed everybody up and down the value chain. We've interviewed mills, manufacturers, and dealers, and contractors. And thematically, when we ask this question, it's incredible. There's one commonality, which is when tough times hit and they made it through, what an impact it made on their overall kind of ethos as to how they run a company or what they learned. And so it's interesting to hear. In terms of moments of pride, do you want to share any your proudest moments since you've been doing this?
Well, I mean, specifically on the mass timber side, you have a real sense of pride when you see some of the first types of buildings go up. So, like I said, the 1510 Webster down in Oakland, I mean, it's truly a phenomenal achievement, not only for the developer but also for us. Being able to produce the Portland Airport and walk through it for the first time when they had their grand opening, and understanding that we provided 9 acres of 2-inch material for the entire roof assembly, and that really wouldn't have really been feasible without a product like ours being available at that period of time. Those types of moments can give you a lot of pride. I was actually at the Portland Airport very recently, and had a man that walked up that used to work for us, but he was a local landowner whose land was all burnt over during the 2020 wildfires. And he had a specific moment of pride to say that, I know that 70% of all the wood that's used in this building in the Portland Airport is all salvage wood. And some of this is some of the trees that were off my land. So at least I can see the beneficial use of those trees going forward. And so seeing that type of reaction from someone that has a very personal connection with the project that we made, and being able to talk to our employees and say, the next time you go through the Portland Airport, look up with a little bit of pride because your hands touched that.
Very cool. And for those who haven't been there, it's beautiful. It's so cool to see that the Portland Airport. So I can only imagine what the other buildings look like in the pride. It brings you. It's very cool to hear about.
So I guess we'll transition lastly to our last segment called Quick Cuts. This is just rapid fire questions. Feel free to opine as much or as little as you'd like. Favorite product that Freres makes?
I think I think our beams and columns are so cool. I mean, to me, it's a step up in the evolution of a glulam beam into something that's can really perform incredibly well. That I think our lambs are one of the best things I can see through. And it's interesting because we didn't think we could make them to begin with, and so it was an evolution of the manufacturing in the facility that allowed us to do that. And it's been a neat additive production element.
Cool. One piece of advice you'd give to someone starting in the industry?
You got to have grit. I mean, you got to be able to, have a little bit of humility, work hard, learn from people. There's a lot of wisdom in this industry that we're losing here soon, and that people are really willing to pass on. But you need to have an open mind. You need to work hard and show people you care.
Sherwood just got done with a company-wide training where those were literally the key takeaways. All right, layup question, final one of the day. Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
I'm going to admit this. I'm actually a Cowboys fan, so I can't say there's been any joy in the NFL season for me so far this year.
Bears.
Lions.
Yeah. Lions, I agree. All right, well, Tyler, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, I learned a lot more than I thought I was going to learn, so I certainly appreciate that. What you guys are doing over there is incredibly exciting and interesting, and we can't thank you enough for taking some time to share this with us today.
No, I just appreciate you guys' invitation.
Yeah, I think it's great what you're doing. I think CLT is a real trend. I think it takes a lot of nerves to be on the front end of it, to be one of the first to do it in the U.S. and to be leading it. So congrats on that front, and I know it's going to keep growing, and I look forward to seeing you on a future podcast where we could talk about all the growth.
That sounds great. I would agree that we're definitely on the bleeding edge, not the leading edge right now. But my crystal ball is telling me that 2025 is going to be our best year ever for the mass timber universe. But yeah, it's a cloudy crystal ball.
Very, very, very cool.
Well, thank you again. That was a great podcast. Tyler had some great information to share. He really is changing the industry, and the industry is shifting of where the use of wood is going to be in the future. It was very cool to learn, very insightful. What do you think, Todd?
Yeah, look, you got a guy here who is taking passion, clearly believes in what he's doing, and turning it into innovation. And I thought it's incredible, from the lobbying to the downstream selling to the taking it by project basis to educating the marketplace. I mean, he's the man in the ring. He's doing the deed. And so, Tyler, we can't thank you enough. If you like what we're doing, like us, subscribe us, follow us for more. Next week, we meet with Kevin Hancock, owner of Hancock Lumber, leader extraordinaire, has some really cool philosophies, and I can't wait to learn more next week.